Hello and welcome to Apparel's Web Connection series. Today's session is entitled Smart Inventory Fulfillment Strategies for Multi-Channel Brands and Retailers. I'm Susan Nichols. I'm the publisher of Apparel, and I'll be serving as your moderator. I'd like to thank our sponsor of today's event, CGF. Well, certainly today's reality is that you all are most likely selling through multiple distribution channels, whether that's e-commerce, wholesale, retail. I mean, almost everybody is in that same position. And for those of you who have separate systems for each distribution channel, and you probably have silos of inventory and data as well, I don't have to tell you that that can become a real management nightmare. So what we'd like to do today is explore several key questions that will hopefully help you better map out the smartest fulfillment strategy for your business. Because certainly, not everybody's going to have the exact same fit, but we want to give you enough information and advice today to help you start thinking about that or continue your thoughts about it. So some of the questions we want to ask are things like, how do you manage planning and purchasing? Who owns the inventory? How do you give all the appropriate parties full visibility to that entire supply chain? And a lot more we're going to talk about as well. We're very pleased to have three expert panelists with us today, and they're going to share both their experiences and help guide this whole conversation. And they include Steve Pender, who is Managing Director of Kurt Salmon, which is now part of Accenture's strategy. Ajay Shidrawal, who is Vice President Global Product Management and Customer Service for CGS. And Kelly Stacy, who is President of VIX PAULA HERMANNY, or otherwise known as VIX. Now, before I turn things over to Steve's going to kick us off and kind of set the stage for the whole conversation. I do want to cover a couple of basic logistics. During the entire webcast, you'll be able to email me any questions you have. If you have any, you're having a hard time hearing or anything of that nature, please just send those to us, and we'll give you a reply from our producer. Now, you can also email me any questions you have for our speakers. There's an area on the left of your screen to type those in. I will hold the questions until the conclusion of our speakers' remarks and then pose them on your behalf. Please know that your identity to the rest of the audience does remain confidential, so we encourage you to feel free to send us as many questions as you like, and we look forward to addressing those. So at this time, I would like to introduce you to Steve Pender. As I said, Steve is the Managing Director at Kurt Salmon, which is part of Accenture Strategy, where he helps the world's leading retailers innovate by implementing strategies that create competitive advantage. Steve has deep experience in omni-channel merchandising, inventory, and end-to-end supply chain. And he's also a thought leader in inventory strategies, helping retailers meet customers at their point of need with the products they desire. Steve, we're very happy to have you, so thank you for joining us, and I'll turn the program over to you.
Thank you very much, Susan. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to be with everyone today. Good afternoon on the East Coast, and good morning still on the West Coast. I'm going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes talking through a few slides here that really start to try to frame up, kind of Ajay's and Kelly's remarks as we get into this. First, to set the context. So as we think about the challenge that most of our clients in the retail brand and vertical apparel specialty retail space are asking us, the real challenge is, what are the right inventory strategies to deliver on the expected results? At the end of the day, consumers and customers continue to look for the right experiences and the right product at the right place, all the standard kind of challenges that we've been trying to solve for a long time, but they're different now. So what are those challenges related to managing inventory in a responsive world? And what have the kind of bevy of responses been? So this is kind of how we'll frame up the first part of the conversation. So on page 7 here, let's see. Not updating on my screen, but not sure why page 7 doesn't want to come up. Susan, are you seeing page 7?
You're on page 7.
All right. Well, for some reason, it's not showing on my screen. So if we're all looking at 4 puzzle pieces, which I hope we are.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. It's not showing on my screen. There are really 4 kind of drivers to this. The reason that we launched into omnichannel as a marketplace were around four expectations, four drivers. The first was, of course, to enhance the customer experience, so deliver on that expectation in consumers' minds and wallets to really be met at their point of need in a place and at a speed that they expect. The second was to use that to drive incremental revenue, so drive top line by improving out-of-stock positions from e-commerce and other channels. The third was profit maximization, so of course, make better use of the assets within our model. So the economic model of retail is primarily based on moving the best efficiency and creating the best efficiency in the largest asset of the business, which is the inventory. And finally, kind of a tag-on benefit, but really, frankly, kind of a starting point for many on this journey was to avoid capital. So with the growth of channels disproportionately to one another, people said, how can I even fulfill the demand as it materializes? So capital avoidance was a big kind of entry point for a number of folks in that channel. And Susan, if you could advance the slides for me because I can't see them. So going to page 8, please. So did these realities, in fact, kind of materialize the way we expected? Well, in some cases, yes, but in some cases, no. So the customer experience, was it really enhanced? Well, in the case of direct fulfillment or direct channel fulfillment, in many cases, omni-channel and order management systems and solutions ended up splitting parcels direct to customer into many different shipments. In some cases, the parcels that arrived at people's doors were shipped by store associates or by brand associates, and they weren't really of the same quality and kind of content that people would expect. And then, of course, you had disconnected availability. So something appeared to be available, but then it turns out that I really couldn't actually get that product fulfilled. Did top-line revenue growth? Well, in many cases it has, but people have struggled to kind of balance the growth between channels. So as one channel takes off, how are we funding the appropriate channel with the right inventory to really make that business accretive in total and not simply cannibalize another? Were fulfillment costs reduced? Well, not in all cases. So in many retailers who have shipped more product from store as opposed from central distribution centers or fulfillment centers, labor costs have increased. Of course, the cost in a store of labor is higher than it is traditionally from a distribution or fulfillment center. And also costs have stacked up. So as I touch the product more often to move it to the point of highest probability of sale at full price, I touch it more and more and it becomes more invested in, more expensive. So if we go to page 9, as we think about taking a step back from simple order management and order fulfillment, really the whole notion of omnichannel is built on the idea and the concept and the almost foundation of creating the right operating model. So this is the point of the journey that we find many of our clients kind of focused on enabling and getting to. And there's two components to it. There's the customer engagement component, which says, what are the insights and analytics that I need to understand about my customer? What are the social selling and community building? What are the customer experience management solutions that I really need? To meet the demands of that center graphic, which across a number of different shopping platforms, which a number of different customer engagement platforms, a number of different kind of brand touch points, all those different things need to be managed kind of almost simultaneously in real time. And that describes and defines all of the different operational supply chain and capabilities on the right-hand side. Ultimate flexibility between creating a fulfillment replenishment need according to an order, allowing and enabling endless aisle product visibility, enabling inventory visibility across the enterprise, creating seamless merchandising planning and inventory management processes. So all of those components kind of come together to then describe and define a future state or a future point. So if you go to the next page, please. So this is the vision for where clients are trying to take and drive their business. It starts on the left with a fairly rudimentary, what we would have called 5-10 years ago, a multi-channel retail operating model. So inventory was physically and systemically separated. If I needed to move or shift inventory to a point of demand, I physically had to move it and I had to transfer it systemically from one place to the other to make it available. And then the next step, clients started to co-locate inventory. So I had multi-channels of inventory pools. Maybe they were quantified separately. They might have been shipped to the point of distribution separately, but ultimately I got them co-located. Then I skip over the vision and to the right-hand side. Well, now I have it co-located, and I've started to share it systemically within the DC. And then finally, Nirvana, the full future state vision. Inventory is completely shared. It's available, but most importantly, it's optimized. And what that means, if I go to the next page, this is a optimization of inventory in what we call one inventory, or some call seamless inventory, is really a multifunction, highly cross-functional journey or challenge to solve. The idea, and I'm going to start with that top bullet on the right-hand side, the idea is that inventory at the end of the day flows to the highest bidder. So what is the pool, what is the point of demand that over the lifetime of that relationship has the highest probability of delivering the best margin back to the business? So who is the highest bidder for that particular quantity of inventory at that moment in time? So then you can trickle down and say, well, there are a ton of implications to really bring that to life. Orders need to be fulfilled, by node that maximize total profit. If I go further back into the planning process, forecasting and plans of that inventory quantity need to evolve, but only lock when required. So how will I commit to the quantity? Well, I need to wait as long as I possibly can to get the best possible forecast. Well, when do I need to commit to that quantity by region? Well, I need to wait until maybe it's X factory in order to really kind of finalize my forecast by region. Well, how do I need to then kind of commit that inventory by channel? Well, I need to wait until, apply those business rules until it's arrived in DC to make that distinction and decision. So really kind of changing the decision points and the quantities that I'm committing to each different demand group as late in the process as possible. And of course, I will have made those decisions based on the best inventory at the time. However, the reality will change. So how do I keep inventory in balance across the network through creating pipes to connect markets, through rebalancing maneuvers? And then lastly, how do I make those decisions? How do I make sure that when I'm moving inventory between channels, between geographies, between regions, that I'm doing it with the right SKUs that have the right margin and the right kind of profit economic model to make the right decisions at the right time? If I go to the next page, as in most cases, the journeys involve a crawl, walk, run type of approach. And we think of it here as both from an order management standpoint and from a broader inventory management standpoint. So in the crawl phase, these are foundational capabilities that most would invest in to make sure that as they build through future phases and implementation waves, they're building on this foundation. So the crawl, of course, would enable basic order allocation optimization, inventory lifecycle, and inventory visibility. The walk phase starts to enable, better or more improved customer delivery and fulfillment functions like ship from store, buy online, pick up in store, and so forth and so on until, again, the one inventory vision is realized. And if you go to the last page, this gets a little more tactical into what do most experiences from folks who are on different parts of that journey really look like. So in the first phase, people looked at build and deploy, which was simply setting up the framework, setting up the foundations of the capabilities that would be required. So a governance framework to organize all these initiatives across the business to march in one direction. To make sure that stores, accounts, sales reps, retailers, our brand managers were all supporting the seamless customer engagement and really understood what the vision was. Create inventory management business rules. Tactical, but such a critical component to how, when asked, when we have to make a decision about which demand to fulfill, what business rules are really going to kind of define that process and that decision criteria. And then in the learn and retool phase, so there's a tremendous, I would say, Gen 1 of order management and inventory solutions that was out there. There was a tremendous amount of learning and retooling that happened. There were big changes and there were small changes. So the big changes being things around, those business rules that we set to really sit on top of, decisions that we had to make in almost real time were not perfect. So let's rebuild those. How would we tier customers from a priority standpoint? What are the buying and planning and allocation processes that we need to improve? And finally, the optimization phase. And frankly, this is where we find, most of kind of our clients are at, or somewhere between stages 2 and 3, or what I would say kind of Gen 2 and Gen 3 of true inventory optimization. Now we're getting into, machine learning being used to create inventory deployment strategies that are based on predictive analytics, not just, rear view mirror forecasts. Pre-deploying inventory into particular geographies based on, again, predictive models that would describe where the demand will come from with a high degree of accuracy. Performing almost dynamic allocation logic. So, looking forward into where the demand would come from, not just from a deployment standpoint, but from an almost real-time reevaluation of allocation logic. And then, of course, the fundamental supply chain components that need to be put against that. So not just forward deploying, but a lot of different network structures that support new store formats and new brand formats. So mini DCs, metro DCs, dark stores, mezzanine picking, bigger back rooms for picking, all these kinds of things are starting to really take the capabilities of getting to the customer quickly and building on them that way. At the end of the day, the ongoing components of the enhancement are still focused on reducing the quantity of total distressed inventory, making the most margin, figuring out the right capabilities that consumers will expect and what are meaningful fulfillment methods that they really want, and then single swipe, making sure that, the whole transaction process is very seamless and enabled from end to end. So that's kind of the conclusion of the components that I wanted to share, and Susan, I'll kick it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Steve. I particularly liked your life cycle there. It's a nice roadmap, kind of at a glance, to see some of the steps. We appreciate that. All right, so let's continue to build on our conversation, and it's a pleasure for me to introduce to you Ajay Shidrawat, who is Vice President of Global Product Management and Customer Success for CGS. Ajay is a senior software executive. He has more than 20 years of experience of successful strategic and tactical leadership in enterprise software. At CGS, he leads the product strategy, the product management, the go-to market activities, as well as customer success for the Blue Cherry suite. And if you're not familiar with Blue Cherry, that's an end-to-end supply chain solution for fashion, apparel, and lifestyle brands. Ajay, we look forward to hearing your viewpoints at this point. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Susan. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you are. So I'm going to continue on the same theme, taking over from Stephen. At CGS, we have customers in the apparel, footwear, and sporting goods industries. So a lot of our experience comes based on the challenges that our customers face. So you'll get a peek into some of that and how we are helping them handle, or they themselves are trying to handle from a process and system perspective. From an agenda perspective, pretty straightforward. So I'll walk through some of the market needs that come out of multi-channel business. What are the challenges that customers are facing? And then, of course, the key topic for this presentation, which is around fulfillment strategies across the multiple channels. And then I'll close with how technology can help solve a lot of these business challenges. So when we talk about market needs, Steve touched a bit upon this, but basically, if you are a wholesaler, if you're a retailer, if you're a brand, you're interacting with consumers and customers across many different channels. That includes stores, social media, mobile, and global. The expectation from the customers are really very high. The customer and consumer wants to explore the product wherever they are. They want to order either from the store or online or some marketplace, be able to get it delivered, to their doorstep or to the nearest store, and as well as, return the product if they don't like it. Also, everything needs to be super fast. So it's a very high expectation on everybody involved in the supply chain, compared to how business was done, a couple of decades ago even. The relationship with the consumers is shifting from one transaction at a time to more of a relationship. So as the consumer interacts with the brand across these different fronts that they explore the products, the companies and brands have the ability to track their behavior across these different interfaces and be able to serve the customer in a meaningful way and build that relationship rather than just one order at a time. Uh, with the social media driving trends and so on, there is also pressure on getting products out to market quicker. So we see that a lot of the customers are trying to see how they can shrink the the concept to design to producing the product and getting it to the store in much less time than how they have been doing it all the years along. Um, the as anybody who is keeping track of these industries, we can see that retail is under tremendous pressure. Stores are getting closed, left and right, and that pressure from the retailers is what I like to call reverberating throughout the supply chain, right? So it is affecting the brands, the wholesalers, all the way back to the factories in terms of how you make products, how you move product, and how do you deliver product. So it's a challenge that everybody is facing. And then finally, over the past few years, if we have learned one thing that the online channels are expanding and evolving, right? So you've got to keep up with that. What's true today may be true tomorrow, but there might be three other ways of doing business with consumers and with customers. So you got to continuously keep track of that. Also quoting NRF in some of the predictions they've made, you can see that online business is growing at about 4x of brick and mortar. So certainly a big area of focus. So let's look at this in terms of how the supply chain works and all the various roles and partners that are participating in this. So if you start at the right, you have the end consumer who is interacting with the brand across various different channels. Now in this area you can see retailers. So you have the retailer stores, and most of the retailers now have their .com sites where they are selling online, as well as some brands would do consignments at retail stores. They would have some of the larger ones certainly have retailer DCs. Then in the middle you have the direct-to-consumer .coms, marketplaces. So Amazon can be a retailer, but also Amazon as a marketplace would be a different channel. Finally, many of the brands would have their own stores, own website, as well as they would cater to the boutique stores. That is sort of the B2B channel that they have to service. We also see that wholesalers, with the pressure from the retail side, have started aggressively pursuing their brands online, and that's a high growth area for them in the coming years, as well as some of the brand retailers, are trying to see how they could expand into the wholesale. So it's becoming a hybrid, and over the years you will see this evolving. Everybody trying to get into these different channels. As we move back, you can see, the brand is the one who is the center of the supply chain, coordinating information, product flow, cash flow, and so on. So the brand is, responsible for designing products, purchasing, planning, and getting it produced and then shipped. So in the back end, you can see the factories, could be domestic, could be overseas factories that have to be coordinated with. And then as the product moves over ships and whatnot, comes to the warehouses, that's where it moves from to either the retail channel, or is drop shipped to the end consumer, or goes to your own stores. So you can see that this is a very simplified picture, but from a day-to-day perspective, customers have to manage and coordinate a lot of different aspects to ensure that they can capture orders from all these channels in a timely fashion. They can allocate product and ship product again based on the delivery times that they promise. Okay, so these are the challenges that customers are facing. I have summarized many of these in this slide. I'm not going to repeat it. When you get a copy of the presentation, you'll be able to look at it. So from a strategies perspective, the rest of my presentation is going to be centered around these 5 pieces. First, I'll talk about, when you look at servicing that type of a supply chain, what kind of setup do you need, right? And what are the driving factors to help you set up the supply chain in the most optimal fashion to service your customers? We will cover planning and purchasing, and then from an inventory perspective, what are the pros and cons for virtual versus pool inventory? And then we go to allocation of goods when the actual orders start flowing in. Finally, I'll cover on some of the options available for fulfillment, depending on a number of factors, again, that that can help customers decide on those options. So the first one, like I said, supply chain setup. There are a number of factors to consider. Order size, for example, if you're looking at e-commerce orders, those are going to be very small orders going to the end consumer's home, small packages, a lot of FedEx, UPS, and those type of carriers use, versus wholesale is going to be, much larger orders, containers and cartons worth, moving sometimes, using cross-dock and other kind of fulfillment options. Delivery time, again, e-commerce over the years has, catered to customers, and, they have started expecting immediate delivery, down to, 2 days and going further down to maybe same day delivery. Type of product. So if you have basics, replenishment type products, those, again, catering to apparel, footwear, and sporting goods, some of those could be year-round type of products, whereas, fashion is very seasonal, so you have to worry about that. Finally, some of the products, could involve specialization. So some work that is done in terms of packaging the product, when it hits the warehouse and before it ships to the stores. From a business model perspective, again, there is variations. Customers could be doing cut to order for some of their large customers, very specific products for specific retail customers of theirs. Building to stock or building to inventory, most of the fashion would probably be done in that fashion. And then, custom orders. So we have some customers who do wedding dresses, right? And those are very, very customized to the end consumer. So you have the pattern and the styles, but you're making it or cutting it, based to the specifications of the particular customer. Profitability, again, based on channels, can vary. You look at what is the volume of your business. Again, e-commerce is going to be small, but we see that channel is growing and it is a very profitable business. It allows some of the wholesalers to build their brands online. And so that's a growth area that they want to worry about versus wholesale, selling into larger major retailers, is their bread and butter, and they need to make sure that, that they continue to deliver on that. Channel priorities, financial management is another factor. How are you organizing your company in terms of the channels? Are they independently managed from a financial perspective, or is it shared financial perspective? That will drive some of the decisions you make. And finally, depending on the size of the business, these parameters or these factors, would be combined in a different way for a very large business, a medium-sized business, or a small business. Next, let's go to planning and purchasing. What we have seen is, especially in our customer base, planning, was sort of should be done and type of process, but basically manage as an add-on responsibility in operations or sales teams. But more and more customers are getting more formal around planning. They're hiring and staffing professionals specifically in planning, and so that's becoming much more prevalent in our customer base. Also, as retailers are facing pressure, they're cutting stores, they're reducing their staff. One of the things that forward-thinking customers are looking at is to take some of the ownership of the retail planning on the wholesale side and have a much better partnership with the retailer. So that relieves the retail buyer, from doing a lot of the analysis, and the wholesaler can build a strong relationship with that retailer. Planning begins with design, and there is various sub-processes, everything from merchandise planning, slot planning, when you're trying to decide how many carryover styles versus new styles. The sales forecast is really more of a bottom-up, planning paradigm that many companies use. That's where the rubber meets the road. Finally, replenishment planning is something you keep track of for your retail customers. As we move into purchasing, so ideally you want to get to a consolidated, centralized purchasing process. So let the demand signals feed from all these different channels, but you can consolidate them and place purchase orders, production orders in a streamlined fashion rather than every channel placing them, at different times on your back end. Typically, the demand is netted against the supply. There are a number of factors and number of streams of data you can look at on both sides in deciding, what to place on your purchases. What we have experienced is, again, the leading edge customers are using technology to completely automate the purchasing process. Inventory management. So let's talk about virtualizing inventory versus pooling inventory. So there are pros and cons to each, and again, depending on your business, you can weigh the pros versus the cons and make the right choice. So if I walk through the virtualization, inventory is segregated by channel, right? So you have inventory separated for your wholesale, for your e-commerce, and within e-commerce you could separate it by the different .coms and so on. What it does is it really secures the inventory, so you can be sure that you can fulfill the orders for that particular channel as long as inventory is available in that bucket. Also, it's easier from a financial tracking perspective because you can track everything for the particular channel. Even though you're doing this in a system, you could still share physical warehouse space for the inventory. Some of the drawbacks, there is some upfront configuration that has to be done to set up these virtual buckets. And there is some risk of lost opportunities because, if you're out of inventory in a particular virtual bucket for a particular channel, even though you may have excess inventory in the other channels' virtual buckets, you may not be able to do that. Now, customers can do that by triggering inventory transfers, but there has to be some manual intervention to do that. So these are the pros and cons for virtual inventory. Now, if you do pursue the pooled inventory model, it's very simple because it's just one pool. It will work if the financial ownership, is managed in a shared fashion across the whole business, and there is less risk of missing sales opportunity because of lack of visibility into inventory. The drawbacks. Wholesale orders, which can be typically large, would possibly cannibalize, let's say, the e-commerce channels or other channels. On the flip side, e-commerce, which is a more rapid churning, more trend-based, could take over a bunch of the hot product and not leave enough for the wholesale channel. There are also returns-related factors. So e-commerce returns could be high, which could impact your metric if you end up selling a lot more than planned. And then, understanding channel financials is difficult in the pooled inventory model. So these are the pros and cons. Again, there is a lot more to this when customers really try to decide, but these are some of the top ones that we covered here. Allocation of goods. So now, your supply chain is set up. You plan and purchase the product. You have come up with your inventory strategy. So as the orders start hitting, how do you decide who gets, what product, and all the way back to production. So there are there are many different parameters you can apply. Some of our more sophisticated customers leverage this type of functionality in a very advanced fashion. Some of the allocation rules, could consider parameters such as channel priority, customer priority, delivery dates. So, for example, you might have orders with varying delivery dates, and you might be able to fulfill the ones which are nearer versus, even waiting for a new shipment to come in in order to be fulfilled at a later date. SLAs with customers, fill rates, there are minimums that especially some of the larger retailers will mandate. Freight costs, where is the product, which product is going to be shipped from where. So again, it's the sophistication that you can layer on. You can start simple, and as you learn, you can see patterns and you can see opportunities to further tweak and fine-tune the allocation logic. So the best systems out there, allow you to set this up in a very sophisticated fashion. There are also, not everything needs to be automated. You need some manual intervention, especially when there are some major customers, major channels that you want to monitor. For example, channel conflict resolution. So there might be alerts so that operations managers could come in if there is a channel conflict and may override a decision that the allocation logic is making. Or always monitor the top major accounts allocations and make sure that they are getting everything that is possible within the system. So once you've allocated, now you get the fulfillment. Again, there are a number of factors to consider in terms of where you stock this product. So some of the factors, if it is e-commerce, are you going to do drop ship? Does this warehouse or distribution center or fulfillment center support that type of delivery model? Does the warehouse support container to container? And sometimes both can be supported from the same warehouse, right? Are you doing specializations? What kind of products are you selling? Are these products fashion, or are they more basics type of products that can be carried, in multiple warehouses versus fashion? You might decide because of the low per unit quantities for styles to stock them only in one or two distribution centers. There are a variety of choices in terms of pursuing, your own warehouse or outsourcing that and really let you focus on your core competencies versus getting the experts do their part. So again, there are a number of different options that are available to decide on the fulfillment. Finally, end-to-end visibility is another key factor. As you had seen, the supply chain includes many different trading partners. There is a whole bunch of information and communication happening between these trading partners. So having an end-to-end visibility is super critical. And with today's technology and systems, you should be able to collect all the information and serve it up to the right stakeholders, both internal and external, so that people can make the right decisions at the right times. Okay. This is my last slide. So as you can see, there are a lot of challenges across this chain, but there are a lot of technologies, systems available, everything from PLM, planning, sales order, inventory, allocation. You can communicate using EDI or API or any other proprietary mechanisms. You have software on the front end, whether it's point of sale, shopping cart. And so, it's really once you decide how you want to serve, you look at all the factors, you can invoke these technologies, and leverage those technologies to optimize your business. Okay. So just a little bit about CGS. We have been in business for more than 30 years. We have customers, in the apparel, footwear, sporting goods, brands, retailers, manufacturers, and we have end-to-end footprint of solutions. So we go all the way from order capture to making products, moving products, storing products, as well as back into the factory floor, where you can optimize, what's being made, how it's being made, and so on. Okay. Thank you. That's my part.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ajay. That was some excellent detail, just as with Steve, and we appreciate that. I do want to remind you to continue to send in your questions. We have some flowing in now, and after we hear next from Kelly Stacy, we'll open the floor with those questions. We are very pleased to have Kelly Stacy with us. Kelly has been president of VIX since 2014, after having served as its executive VP and director of sales and marketing. Her career with VIX started in 1998 when she worked as a consultant for the startup brand. At that time, a startup brand, no more. She led VIX into creating a new lifestyle category in the U.S. market, luxury swim and resort wear. And VIX is now the leading developer, marketer, and distributor of branded swimwear, resortwear, and accessories in more than 28 countries. Her primary focus is the development of the company-wide business strategy, including operations, manufacturing, and sales. And currently, she's spearheading the company's retail growth and has opened 2 doors in the United States this year. Kelly's originally from Florida, but she's currently living in San Diego with her husband, daughter, and 3 dogs. Kelly, we are so happy to have you here with us today. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Susan. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about our experience. And while 1998, it seems like a lifetime ago. So you can imagine we've seen the highs and the lows of the market, and we've seen paper to digital and the PR strategies change. So it's interesting, it's exciting, but it's definitely a challenging time. And I'm hoping that I can shed some light for the listeners here and maybe help them a little bit, and they can learn from some of my mistakes and some of my lessons learned. I'd just like to take you on a quick journey for those of you who don't know the brand, just a quick little snapshot of that, a little bit about our supply chain, our manufacturing model, a little bit about our channels and what that looks like, some of our core competencies, your supply chain overview, and then some of the challenges, opportunities, and just something to leave you with, a few lessons learned. For all of you who aren't familiar with VIX, we're very well known for our swimwear. We like to think we're the CEOs of swim. We're very proud of that positioning. A lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, and short-sleeved executive management to get here. We designed for women who appreciate beauty, quality, and attention to detail. And, we kind of blend the sexiness of Brazil with the coastal allure of California. I'm humbled to be a part of a team that's led by PAULA HERMANNY. She is the founder and creative director and the visionary for the VIX brand. She moved to the U.S. back in the 90s and to study, and she saw a void in the market for swimwear, fashionable swimwear, and she decided to start distributing swimwear and eventually launched her own brand named VIX. She's a very inspiring person with a lot of passion. She brings the vision of the brand to life, and I bring the reality of the sales and operation to the table. So together we've been able to, along with our amazing team, kind of bring this company forward. We do have a unique component in our company. We do have our own manufacturer in Brazil. We have operations there. We have a very robust Brazilian business made up of wholesale, eCommerce, and strategic retail. We also have a manufacturer whereby we actually create all of our product and for the swimwear category, and then also some other categories as well. It definitely adds a new and kind of exciting component, and sometimes a challenging component to delivering product, but it is part of our model. We also have operations in Carlsbad, California. It's in Southern California. We have a distribution center here as well. Just a quick overview of our channels, just to give you a snapshot of kind of what our footprint looks like. We do have a strategic retail presence, and Brazil will be opening up our 10th store by the end of the year. And in the U.S., we've just opened 2 stores this year. Our strategy for retail is a little bit different than many. It's really more about building beyond the swimwear category. We are very well known for swimwear. We're very proud of our distribution, and I'm very satisfied with the market appetite for our swimwear. We're really looking to expand beyond that and expose our customer to, the other categories, our ready-to-wear, our accessories, etc. So that is really what that strategy is about. Which brings me to our wholesale business, which I think, we wouldn't be where we are without our wholesale distribution, and we have some of the best partners, I think, in the market. We have really strong partnerships with them, and we are very focused on maintaining that distribution. We feel like one hand feeds the other, and so we're having very honest conversations about how do we build their business, how do we move through the market with the changing consumer, and the partnerships are stronger than ever because of it. We also have e-commerce channels, which, I'm proud to say that we've always had e-commerce as part of our business model, and it's been less about converting customers online and really more about having a digital flagship store so that we could really, kind of showcase our visuals and all of our photography, et cetera, and have a moment with our customer. We have separate platforms, one for Brazil. Brazil is a pretty complex place to do business, so we definitely have a little bit of a different structure as far as how we manage that business. And then we have a platform here in the U.S. and the rest of the world. We ship internationally from the U.S. Business. So we do have, pretty robust. We're proud of our e-commerce channel. Again, it's one of the places where we meet our customer, and that's how we like to look at wholesale, brick-and-mortar retail, and e-commerce. It's just different doors we open, and there's our customer. We want to be there for her. I think it's super important to talk about core competencies because as I lead a company, I'm constantly reminding my team to really think about what do we want to focus on. There's limitations as to bandwidth. We're a small company. We have a big distribution, but we act very small in the sense that we're very short-sleeved. We're extremely hands-on. So I like to kind of think about these core competencies when we're making decisions about where to take the brand next. We are very brand-centric, which we're very proud of. We've always been very focused on what's best for the brand. Design is a very important core competency of ours. We are very focused on creating amazing product. We believe strongly that the consumer, she's very smart, she's very savvy, and she'll buy smoke and mirrors, but in the end, you have to deliver an amazing product for her to keep coming back for more. So we're very proud that we put that, at the forefront of our focus on a daily basis. We're very proud of our distribution, as I said, our retail reach. We feel really, we're very, proud of everything that we've built and all of our partners, and we believe that every single retail door that we have is an important door for the customer. We are also supply chain driven. I think that comes from my leadership. I'm an advocate of it's great to have amazing product. It's great to tell stories, but in the end, if it doesn't make it to the store, to the end consumer, we really failed. So the supply chain is an important piece of our focus and our core competency. And then, of course, we're always looking at how do we package up our product and really give the best customer service. So if anyone's ever ordered from our website, you'll find that you get a little present when you receive it, and it's something that really kind of sets us outside of a lot of the competitors. So these are the places where we say, okay, these are our initiatives. These are the things we can do ourselves, and we're going to focus on these core competencies to move the company forward. Just a brief overview of our supply chain and kind of what the engine that runs this big machine we have. We do have an ERP system, Blue Cherry. We have integrated EDI, financial, B2B. Very proud of that as well because we did that back in 2011. My thought process was I wanted to make sure that I had a team of thinkers and they were doing less doing and more strategic thinking. And I wanted to make sure that I had visibility on what was working and the proper reporting and And I wanted to give birth to people to grow the vision of the company, not necessarily to run reports. So we implemented that system, and we're definitely reaping the rewards of making that investment early on. With the recent launch of retail, we've just rolled out Retail Pro for the 2 stores that we do have, and we're on the Magento Enterprise platform for our e-commerce solution. So a little bit about our challenges. I mean, I think our biggest challenge, because of the fact that now we have this multi-channel strategy, and wholesale is the driver of most of our data. We really can see what's happening because we understand what's happening and what's converting. But we do have, our e-commerce and retail supply chain as well, that we really want to be able to make sure that we're feeding the demand where it needs to be. And of course, we're gross profit savvy, and we like to think about margins and importance in that way. But in a market where I think the life cycle of a product or the life expectancy of a product has become smaller and smaller, it's really more about finding a home for that product before the product becomes worth less and less to us. So we really want to make sure that when we're thinking about our how to maximize our inventory, it's less about, is this customer more important, and it's more about, this customer wants it, let's make sure we get it to her so we can limit our liability later on down the road, because the window has gotten shorter. We are in swimwear, which is obviously a seasonal category, but I think it goes for any type of product, even outside of swimwear. We're seeing it across the board. It's just product is overexposed, and the consumer does walk away and move on, and we're launching new collections every month. So our goal is to make sure that product gets to the right person. We do have significant blind spots now because our retail and our e-commerce business, they operate outside of the ecosystem, so we don't really have that integrated point of view. And so it obviously, at this point, for the size of those businesses, it's not detrimental. But as those businesses grow, I think we're definitely losing these at-once opportunities. And then also just the forward thinking of being able to create the best collections possible. Some of the reporting and the analysis is also a gap for us because we don't have that integrated system that we can report on all channels and kind of see. Of course, we can do that in a very manual way, but what we found is that when things become manual, they aren't considered as often when we're making decisions. So I like to automate as much as possible. Our opportunities, I think, we have the systems, we have the integration capabilities, the APIs. When we made the investments in our platforms, it was one of my thought process and decision making model was, I want to make sure that I have integration ability. I want to make sure that my partners have the ability to integrate with Blue Cherry, and Magento has the ability to integrate with Retail Pro. And so though I didn't roll that out when we initially went live with the system, I always had in the back of my mind is I want to have that flexibility in the future. So we are definitely set up for success, and our really limitation right now is really just the time and the window of opportunity, so that we can, create those projects and implement those projects. So just to kind of finish this off and kind of circle back on, my lessons learned for those on the call that are thinking about how do I catch up. This is overwhelming, and it is overwhelming to me as a smaller business. Is really know your limitations and focus on your core competencies. I think that's super important. And leverage the digital and technology partners whenever possible. I think some channels are just partnership channels, so I definitely advise thinking about that when you're thinking about overwhelming technology needs and you just don't think you have the internal bandwidth to manage it. And then my final thought is just stay as nimble as possible, because it's over 20 years we've seen many changes, and one of the upsides of my decisions, I think, with the technology partners is I've never had to go to the owner and say, I can't do that because my technology is we're not capable. It's always a matter of we can, it's going to be this. So I think having flexible platforms and having partners that understand that and staying as nimble as possible, I think that's the key to the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. You know, VIX is certainly an impressive brand, and it sounds like you're really driving it forward with some of your technology strategy and investments, so congratulations. At this time, we are going to move into our Q&A session for all of our speakers. And Kelly, while you were talking, the first question came in for you, and that is, what are the key competencies that you look for in technology digital partners, and is there any advice you could provide on this front?
Yeah, thank you. You know, my thought process on partners is they need to understand what you have to work with internally. What are your, you know, what is your internal IT? What's your IQ in IT? What does your team look like? How much are you willing to invest yourself, and how much do you want to lean on them as partners? You know, that's the first sort of gate they have to go through. They have to be able to understand where we are, and they have to have a team that can meet us where we are. They also need to have technology, I think, that is being developed and being invested in, and where you can see that they're moving that technology forward. And then I think the third, a very important piece is you kind of need to know their dance card. You know, I say this a lot, but I think if they dance with the right brands, they have more credibility for me. So if we understand, okay, yes, their dance card's pretty full, and there's some brands that they're dancing with that are further ahead than I am, and I can see that that's where I can go if I partner with them, it'll just save you a lot of time, you know, paying for them to learn, you know, at your expense.
Great, thank you. Steve, we have a question for you, and the question is, what are the common inventory blind spots you see that brands and retailers are facing?
Sure. So when I think about capabilities as blind spots and where people need to kind of invest, there's a couple of them. I think one is around kind of the more sophisticated optimization of forward-looking demand. So really kind of trying to understand that there's been a tremendous amount of investment and improvement in where people forecasting short life cycle product, such as, you know, high fashion apparel. So I think that's certainly one of them, trying to get a better sense of where the demand's going to come from. I think another one is, you know, when I have a conflict, coming up with highly dynamic business rules that are going to help automate the decision process in the moment of need. So when you know, when I get that kind of demand signal that I didn't expect, and I don't have inventory there to satisfy it, be it in the direct channel, the retail channel, the brand channel, whatever it is, how do I get it there? So those are a couple of examples, I think, where I see people kind of most improving today.
Okay, great. And Steve, another question that was specifically for you. When inventory is shared, as in one pool, is all or part of the inventory ordered as store ready, which increases the cost of the product?
This is a really, really great question, because it's kind of gets to some of the tactics that become big trip points for the strategies. And there's actually a couple components to what I would call store ready. There's you know, where people start with individually bagging inventory for direct-to-consumer shipments. Does it arrive on a hanger? There's universal tagging, both care and content tagging in multiple languages. Then there's, you know, the brand tagging, and there's also pricing. And then finally, folks are looking at RFID, and do I need to, you know, deploy RFID on every garment, or just the ones that I'm going to be selling through retail channels? So there's a lot there to unpack and a lot there to figure out. The short answer is that no, people aren't generally making everything store ready. That's where some started, but it becomes extremely cost prohibitive to the business case. So it becomes yet another kind of decision point in the process that you try to delay until the last possible point. So some are looking at tagging, updating pricing, care and content labels, tags that aren't sewn into the garment domestically, and trying to automate those operations to take a lot of the cost out. But ultimately, you know, trying to just push the decision process as far forward in the process to where I don't have to make the decision until I'm sure that I'm going to commit that product to a particular channel, a particular geography or region.
Okay, thank you. Ajay, there's a couple questions that have come in for you as well. The first one for you is, how do you manage channel conflicts in respect to fulfillment?
Yeah, so I think in my presentation I covered this. There are a couple of options. A couple of options to do this, from an inventory perspective. So we talked about virtualizing the inventory. One way is, in your ERP system, hopefully it supports this, where you create virtual locations. Those locations can be created for individual channels. And within a channel, example, .coms, you could have separate locations for each of the .coms. So that's one way to do it. Another common way we see customers doing it is in the system to create bulk orders. So, for example, for your e-commerce, you could create a bulk order for X number of units, and then as orders come in, you basically fulfill from those bulk orders. It's called bulk drawdown, right? So these are the two ways that you can manage channel conflict.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more question, and Kelly, we have another one for you. First off, the person says, thank you for sharing. And there's kind of several components to the question, so I don't want to overwhelm you, but let me just take it in a couple parts for you. So when you say your retail and e-com channels are not integrated with ERP, does this mean your retail e-com system is buying units from wholesale in bulk and then completing fulfillment through the retail e-com system?
Yes, it's exactly what's happening. So when we purchase for our e-commerce, it's just like another store that we purchase for, and we put in pre-planned buys for that and for the retail store at this point because we're not integrated.
Okay. And then there's two more parts to the question. Is the fulfillment done in your wholesale warehouse or a 3PL? Also, do you make your ERP, ATS/OTS available to your e-com site as well as your e-com plan?
So we do our fulfillment in-house. We don't work with a 3PL, so the answer to that is we do it in our own fulfillment center. And yes, we look at our ATS once we fulfill the demand for wholesale and we've fulfilled, our initial setups for our retail and e-commerce stores. We look at it as our available to sell as, an opportunity to sell through additional stock. So we open that up. We have weekly meetings to discuss, where the demand is. Are there opportunities to resell? It's a pretty hands-on making sure that we're maximizing inventory. So yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, we have come to the conclusion of today's web event. If we did not get to your question, we will reach back out to you personally. I want to thank you all for attending. The webinar will be archived should you or your colleagues wish to access it again. And a big thank you to our speakers, Steve Pinder, Ajay Shidrawat, and Kelly Stacy, as well as our sponsor, CGS. Have a great day.
Thank you.